Twitter Inc. and the Bharat Sarkar are at war over the government's new digital rules. But has this fight now reached a point of no return? After Twitter cried intimidation and threat to free speech, the Indian government has hit back, saying that the microblogging site must follow the law and not preach about freedom of expression.
It's the government of the world's biggest democracy against the world's most popular social network. The Twitter versus Center showdown has escalated. Now, a plea has been filed against the tech giant in the Delhi High Court for failing to comply with the new digital rules. On Thursday, even as the IT ministry sought compliance reports from social media companies, Twitter went public with a statement that got the government all riled up. The social media app said that it is trying to keep free speech intact and is concerned about the intimidation tactics used by police. The microblogging site further added that it is critical to adopt a collaborative approach and that the company will strive to comply with the law of the land. The IT ministry came out with an angry and aggressive retort. The government said it was not the social media platform's prerogative to ensure free speech. It lashed out at Twitter, saying the site was trying to dictate terms to the world's largest democracy and undermining India's legal system. The statement even said Twitter was trying to defame India.
कोई किसी की आलोचना कर रहा है या कोई किसी की आलोचना का जवाब दे रहा है तो आप तय करेंगे कि किस अकाउंट को चलने दिया जाए, किसको बंद किया जाए। अपना काम करें, जनता को अवसर दें, अच्छा काम किया है, खूब मुनाफा कमाएं, हमें कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। लेकिन हमें आजादी और बोलने की आजादी की नसीहत नहीं दें।
The government of India has also accused Twitter of double standards.
ये सिंगापुर के वेरिएंट को जब कहा गया तो वहां प्रोटेस्ट किया गया तो आपने फट से हटा दिया। लेकिन भारत के कोविड दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण है तो आप उसको इंडिया वेरिएंट अपने प्लेटफॉर्म पर चलाते हैं। तो जब लाल किले पर कुछ शरारती और आतंकवादी प्रोत्साहित करने वाले ताकतों ने हमला किया तो आपने कहा ये तो फ्रीडम ऑफ एक्सप्रेशन है, बोलने का अधिकार है। लेकिन जब वॉशिंगटन के कैपिटल हिल पर लोगों ने हमला किया तो आपने सबके ट्विटर अकाउंट बंद कर दिए, उस समय के राष्ट्रपति का भी बंद कर दिया। अच्छा किया। तो भारत के साथ ये दोहरा मानदंड क्यों?
The government Twitter war erupted a day after WhatsApp dragged the government to court, saying the new IT laws would impinge on the privacy of its users. The center countered the argument, saying while it respected privacy, national security comes first. Facebook has sought more engagement with the government while assuring that it will begin the process for compliance. Tech giant Google said it had consistently invested in personnel to combat illegal content. For now, all social media platforms have been given 15 days by the government to show compliance with the new set of IT rules. Bureau Report, India Today.
So who's being unreasonable here? On the one side, you've got the tech giant Twitter, which tags a government spokesperson tweet as manipulated media without explaining in the public domain why that tweet has been tagged as being manipulated, acting as judge and jury by itself. That raises serious questions. On the other side, you've got a government now pushing hard, which is leading critics to wonder whether people who say nasty things about the government or have an alternate political point of view will be hauled up, possibly put behind bars, just because they have a point of view which the government doesn't appreciate. Joining us at this moment to talk about this very important conversation, I want to welcome first and foremost Mr. Amit Malviya, spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He runs the party's IT cell. We have with us Mishi Chaudhary, technology lawyer. Aparmaya Radhakrishna is the co-founder of Ku, the Atmanirbhar Desi app to take on Twitter. Murugevel Janki Raman is the founder of matrimony.com. Gushabad Grover is a senior researcher at the Freedom of Expression CIS, the Center for Internet and Society. I want to start by asking Amit Malviya to lay out why you believe that Twitter in the statement that they've put out, the position that they've taken, hitting out at the government, questioning your motives, questioning whether freedom of expression will be imperiled by your government's move. Why do you believe that what this California-based tech giant is doing is wrong and that Twitter ought to fall in line and comply with law? Mr. Amit Malviya.
Well, first of all, India is one of the largest democracies in the world. We have a constitution that has provisions to protect freedom of right and expression of citizens. And no private entity, whether it is Twitter, Facebook, or WhatsApp, or any other social media platform for that matter, can be above law. And Twitter must realize this sooner, the better it is. Now, coming to this law in particular, what does the government of India want these tech giants to do? Appoint a resident compliance, contact, and grievance redressal officer. That is not a big ask. It also clearly says that under 4 categories, which is terrorism, law and order, child pornography, and sexual crime against women, if the government asks for certain information on the people who may have used their platform, then the agencies have the right to do so, whether through a judicial order or through designated people, and these social media companies must comply. Now, let me give you a few examples to illustrate why these tech giants have applied their own policies inconsistently. When you have the Capitol Hill seize, they went ahead and acted against some users. But when a similar seize was laid on the Red Fort and the government of India demanded for people who had been using their platform, they were not forthcoming. They deplatformed a sitting US president as if he did not have the right to expression and free speech, and made it about community standards. Now, if you look at their behavior in countries such as Germany, in the United Kingdom, in France, in several African countries, in Brazil, everywhere they have been accused of interfering in the democratic process of that country. You have on the one side, the former Indonesian Prime Minister put out rabid tweets asking for killing of French nationals, but that is not taken down. But a similar tweet on the other side is promptly acted against.
Okay, so you made an important point, and I want to go across to Mishi Chaudhary for her first counter to what the government is saying. Let's take the Sambit Patra, love, affair, manipulated media. Twitter decides this is manipulated, doesn't tell us why it thinks that tweet is manipulated. They could have good reasons, maybe they don't. But is Twitter the one who will decide, or will an Indian court be the one who determines and decides? Amit Malviya's main argument is that these tech giants act arbitrarily, they act in line with their own political ideology, and how can they say that they will not comply with Indian law? If they're operating in India, they have to fall in line and operate according to Indian law. Mishi Chaudhary.
Thank you, Rahul. First thing I'm going to say here is rights which Mr. Malviya is talking about, freedom of speech and expression and right to privacy. They are provided under our Indian constitution against the state. The state, that is government of India, is bound by the constitution to protect and guarantee these rights to its citizens. It's not the responsibility of a private company to either protect these rights or offer them. That's the first thing I'm going to say. The second thing is these are private businesses and they have their terms and conditions about, like any business would have, that you can go into a shop, they say, okay, these are the various things which we can offer and we can allow you to enter. There are some laws which we have to follow and we will follow. And I will say this is not a counter. What has happened is the big platform companies, the ones which we are now talking about, Facebooks, WhatsApps, and the Twitter of the world, they definitely have become big enough that they need regulation. However, the problem which has happened here is that various issues have been conflated. Sometimes it is about privacy. Sometimes it is about free speech and expression. The other times it is about when what is required by them in order to check misinformation, that becomes a dispute. So instead of using things like antitrust, a separate data protection bill to protect the right of privacy, and also talk about content regulation, which is takedown of stuff, which is blocking access to certain information. All of this is clubbed together, and every random thing is thrown in the name of saying we want to check fake news, we want to take the control the powers here of the companies. So this is much more nuanced than saying, oh, I'm going to provide a counter, Mr. Malviya is going to talk about the government. Because I think both of these these stakeholders who have a lot more power than the citizens are holding a theater in the time of a pandemic and trying to distract. I will say about these specific rules, which are the law right now, because these are subordinate legislation. The parliament hasn't met for the 30 days since they were notified. In these very rules, Rule 3B10 requires a platform like Twitter to tell its users and then not upload any information which is patently false and untrue. It is written or published in a manner with the intent to mislead. So you cannot pass a law and say that you must do something if an information you have found to be patently false. So Twitter in this case comes across some information, finds it to be patently false and untrue, and then labels it. There is no law which prevents or which gives the power to the government to interfere between what happens between one individual and what happens between this party, which is Twitter here. There is just no
sure,
power
but in which case, can Twitter act as judge and jury? That's the point.
No, let me complete. That's the problem which the government wants them to ask. The rules require Twitter and Facebook, etc., to become judge and jury, because the rule earlier was only on a court order or a government order, which is a reasoned order, can you take any action.
Okay, so let Amit Malviya respond to it before I go to the others. She makes an important point that you're wanting the platforms to play judge and jury, but essentially only when it suits the government. So if Sambit Patra gets called out for manipulated media, then you have a problem. If there's something else which shows your government or any of its protagonists in bad light, that's fine. That's what you want Twitter and Facebook to do. Amit Malviya.
Rahul, that is not the case. Let me just make a very clear distinction. There are platforms which call themselves intermediary, which is what these social media companies would like to call themselves, which means that they don't control the information that flows on it and are not liable for what is put on their platforms. On the other side, they sit and editorialize, which essentially means that you take down certain things which you think is not appropriate or you don't approve of, or you tag certain content as manipulated media because you seem to have certain information which is not there in the public domain, and so on and so forth. Now, what the government of India is very clearly saying, that if you are an intermediary, then you cannot be editorializing, and if you wish to editorialize, then there have to be clear guidelines and you must adhere to what any other publisher would. These intermediary guidelines for the moment stipulate conditions on these social media companies where it clearly says that under 4 categories: terrorism, law and order, child pornography, and can I please finish, Mishi? And I'll be quite grateful if you do not keep interrupting me while I'm speaking. And the crime against women. That is what the central government is essentially saying, that if there is a demand, that these tech companies must come forward and give the details. It in no way looks at dissent. It in no way looks at comments that
Mishi Chaudhary wants to make a quick interjection before I go across to the other guests. Mishi, go ahead.
Mr. Malviya, I wasn't interrupting. The problem is there are 10 categories.
Well, you were and you were rude.
Okay, one at a time, please.
Sorry, there are 10 categories there. And those categories are not the only categories which you lay out, which is usually said child pornography, terrorism, and protection of women.
You haven't read the directive. I'm sorry, you're ill-informed.
Amit, let us speak, please.
Rude.
Mr. Malviya, I have been working on these rules for a very long time. We participated in the consultation.
Amit, you interjected, and I said don't interfere. And I told Mishi that very clearly while you're speaking. I expect the same courtesy. Allow her to speak, only then
Well,
will we
I
have...
don't appreciate her interjecting.
Yeah, we stopped her when she did it. We request you to extend the same courtesy.
rude,
Only then will
and
we
she
have a
must know it.
sensible conversation. You've made a point. Let us speak. Mr. Chaudhary.
Sorry, Mr. Malviya, I don't know how, I'm not rude and there's no intention to be rude. I'm
Stop
sorry if you
addressing me,
feel that.
speak to the anchor. I don't wish to have this conversation with you.
Okay, Mr. Malviya, I think I have read the rules in detail. I'm very much aware of
You
the
have
10
read
categories.
nothing, and you know
Rule
nothing.
3B. Okay, Mr. Malviya, I don't know nothing. Please read Rule 3B and see the 10 categories out there. And these companies don't call themselves intermediaries. The IT Act calls them intermediaries. Editorially and removal of content is required by our law. It is not that they go and what you are speaking, they don't change what you are speaking. They can either take it down, they can block access to it. What they can do is they can also label certain things to inform the users as it is required by law. The idea here, Rahul, is that in early aughts, and even when the Silicon Valley was starting, it was pretty clear that if I speak something on a platform, then I should be liable for it, not the platform itself. That is why US came with Section 213, the Communication Decency Act. In India, what happened, if we remember Bazi.com, which was like eBay, Mr. Avnish Bajaj, who was the CEO of Bazi.com, he was arrested because some objectionable material, which was on a CD, which was being sold on his website by some person, ex-person, he was just selling it. But Mr. Avnish Bajaj, the CEO, actually was arrested. The parliament got together, made an amendment to the IT Act. That is where Section 79 comes into being and says, this is right. If we are going to have e-commerce, if we are going to have the robust kind of an ecosystem in India, because we do have the talent in India, because we are going to be a digital country, then we will also have to offer the platforms the same kind of safe harbor protections as is being perhaps offered in other countries. And the example that time was US. That's when these platforms were designated at Section 79. And I have to say, the UPA government also came up with this kind of subordinate legislation. These legislation and rules that time were challenged in the Supreme Court in the Shreya Singhal matter and were discussed in detail. So platforms don't themselves designate it, our law designates
Okay.
it.
So
then the categories, nobody is
Aparmaya
objecting
Radhakrishna,
about
explain
a
what
child.
you've done at coup. Why is it that you believe that these international tech giants ought to do what the Atmanirbhar apps are doing? Why isn't a problem? You've appointed grievance officers. Explain what you've done to comply with the law and why you think that's the right approach.
I think social media has existed for a decade and a half or even more. There was Orkut and all those guys, right? So I think it's developed over a period of time. And, even after 15, 20 years of social media users are still not feeling safe, right? Overall, there will be less than 1% of the creators or the users of social media who will keep coming and creating some kind of trouble on social media. So in order to make social media better and safer place, there's a lot of scope, right? And just like we have traffic rules, I think usage of social media should also have some rules, so that the less than 1% who actually create a mess can be pulled up and questioned. Not that everybody will be punished or anything will happen to them, but it is important that every user thinks twice before saying something online. Today, it looks like everybody who wants to say something rude wears a mask on social media and comes and says whatever they want, right? So that's the main problem.
No, but aren't you concerned? I mean, I know that at this moment, many ministers in the government are on your platform, but essentially the concern from the perspective of those who don't like this government is if they say something which is nasty or which the government doesn't approve of, then the government and its agencies may come after them. And this is not just an apprehension. It's been happening as recently as last week when some posters were put up that was offline, not online, but it can happen online as well, which asked questions about vaccines being exported. This was by political activists who were rounded up, locked and sent to jail.
So as a platform, I don't think we are the judge of what people put up. Like, I don't know how other platforms look at it, international ones in particular, but at least at Coup, we are saying, there is an elected representative, there are users, and we are the platform, right? So what is being said on the platform is the responsibility of the user. And if there is objectionable content, no matter which country we go to, we will abide by that country's rules. Because the elected representatives are the ones who are representing the citizens of that country, right? So if they feel that something is going against the law of the land, or any other regulatory body feels that something that is said is against the law of the land, and there is a notice that is sent to the platform like Coup, we will take it down, right? But at the same time, we want to reassure that 99% or more of the users do not fall under this category. We're talking about the very few who cause trouble on the internet, right? So that is our take, right? You respect the law of the land, no matter which country we go to and all.
Okay, so Gurshabad Grover, Twitter says that this is intimidation, that the fact that you've got the police come to its offices in the middle of a pandemic when there's no one there at 8 p.m. at night is really an attempt by the government in the middle of a pandemic to browbeat these tech companies to fall in line. Do you agree with that? Or do you think, as Malviya says, that it's completely unfair and inappropriate for these companies to be making money in India and saying we won't follow Indian law?
Thanks, Rahul. So on the question of whether Twitter is following Indian law or not, the fact of the matter is that Mishi has painted a very accurate legal picture of the situation in India. The IT Act does call these platforms intermediaries. And if you look at Rule 3D in the new regulations, it is very clear that these platforms are allowed to be the judge or police content on their platforms. The legal position on this is very, very clear. And the fact of the matter is that we do want these platforms to police content in a certain way. We do not want to be surrounded by spam or explicit content all the time. So there is a certain duty that they are carrying out. Now, when it comes to complying with the law, the fact of the matter is that Twitter has not violated any law, and even the police in this matter is not citing any particular law or rule that allows them to go to the intermediary to ask an explanation for why a particular tweet was marked as manipulated media. So the legal position is very clear, and the police has not justified the grounds for approaching Twitter in this manner.
Okay, let Amit Malviya respond to the point that both
Mishi...
Okay, go on. Complete what you're saying quickly.
I'll just quickly add that the Twitter, of course, we need transparency in terms of how it moderates content, but any action from the police must be based in law. In this case, it isn't. Twitter has a history of accepting content takedown orders and information requests, so it is false to say that they do not entertain these requests. And in this case, the content takedown law, Section 69A of the IT Act, allows the government to censor speech in complete opaqueness from the public. So that is why the passionate defense of freedom of expression that the government is putting now seems a bit hypocritical.
Okay, Mr. Malviya, the law was amended to ensure that these intermediaries actually clean up fake news online, and which is what they've done. You didn't like it in this instance because it happened to be a BJP spokesperson, and which is why Twitter alleges and internet freedom activists allege that your government is now trying to browbeat Twitter to fall in line, whereas you amended the law for them to be able to do exactly what Twitter did.
Look, Rahul, we did not amend the law. The law existed before we came into office. So it was the legacy of the UPA. The intermediary rules that have been framed now, as in addition to the existing laws, expect these social media companies to do certain things. Also, these social media companies are not supposed to be sitting in judgment of what people tweet or what people say, unless they comply to or are in violation of the law of the land. That we should be very clear. Freedom of speech and expression will be dictated by the constitutional position of India and not by what Twitter thinks is right or wrong. It is not for Twitter to decide what is fake news and what isn't fake news, or for that matter, any other social media. Let me give you an example. The attack on Charlie Hebdo that happened, you may think that this was an act of terror. Someone else may think that this was Islamic Jihad. Twitter will censor somebody who says Islamic Jihad and perhaps will let a terror attack narrative pass. That is the problem that we're talking about. As far as Delhi police is concerned, there was an FIR filed by the Congress party alleging that the toolkit is not theirs. The matter was in the domain of investigation. The Delhi police was looking at evidences. Twitter, in the meanwhile, goes ahead and tags the content posted by people as manipulated media. So clearly, Twitter has some information that the agencies did not have. All that the agencies did is went to their office and served a notice saying, please let us know what is the information that you have, which is beyond what is there in the public domain.
No, but that's the point, Gushabad Grover, that internet freedom activists and companies like Twitter need to answer. You've declared something as being manipulated media, huge embarrassment for Sambit Patra. People are wondering what he did, which was manipulated, and yet you don't explain how you arrived at that conclusion. You know, even when a Supreme Court or High Court judge pronounces a particular verdict, he explains the rationale so people know how this judge came to the verdict and the conclusion that what Sambit Patra did was manipulated. Twitter hasn't explained that. Is it okay for them not to explain why they did what they did?
Rahul, if I may quickly come in, the point is that, of course, we would like more transparency and accountability from platforms like Twitter and Facebook. This is absolutely true. My basic point was that what they have done is not in violation of any law, and Mr. Malviya's reading of the law is also incorrect. If I may quickly quote point 3D in the new rules notified, and this is the BJP government in power notifying the rules in February of 2021, so only 2 months ago. This is provided that removal of disabling of access to any information or communication on a voluntary basis or on the basis of grievances shall not amount to be a violation of the conditions which give them safe harbor and immunity from liability. So this is the law in this regard is very clear. So it is false to say that Twitter does not have the power to do this. Now, do we want more transparency and accountability in this process? Absolutely. But the question we're trying to address is how the police is taking arbitrary action against a company which has no basis in law. That's the point, right?
Okay.
I pointed out to a specific rule. Can the government or any BJP spokesperson point to the specific provision which allows them to question the decision of the platform and send the special cell of the Delhi police?
Do you want to answer that, Amit Malviya?
Sorry, what's the question here?
His question is, under what law, under what rule did the Delhi police go and ask Twitter how they labeled it manipulated media? There is nothing, according to Gushabad Grover, which allows the Delhi police to do so.
Why? Delhi police is investigating an FIR that has been filed to them. And if somebody has gone ahead and tagged the particular content as manipulated, then they are liable to explain to the agencies what is the information that they have on board. Where is exactly the doubt on that?
That is exactly what I'm asking. How are they liable to give an explanation? What part of the law says that? No part of the law says that. The law should say that. We can discuss that.
No. Let's be very clear on this. There is a matter that is sub judice, that is under investigation at the moment, and a certain private entity sits in judgment of it. Presumably it has certain information which is not with the agencies. Are you saying the agencies cannot ask that private entity for the information that they have which is not in the public domain? Is that your argument?
No.
That's exactly what Delhi police did. Where is the question on that?
The central government is allowed to request information from platforms like Twitter.
Delhi police is the investigating agency in this case.
Yes.
There is an FIR registered. They find out that Twitter seems to have some information which is not in the public domain, on the basis of which they have tagged the tweet as manipulated. Is it your argument that the Delhi police are not well within their right to ask that private agency to provide that information?
There are two.
Is that what you're saying?
There are two distinct matters here, Mr. Malviya. One is the fact
I have just one question. Please tell me.
Let him speak. He's heard your question. He's heard your question. Let him respond.
Yes.
Let him
May I
respond.
answer the
What is the
question if you are
information do they
posing it to
have?
me?
Go on.
the Delhi police, the central government, is empowered under Section 69 of the IT Act to request any information it wants from an intermediary or platform. This is absolutely true. That this is a separate matter because we haven't seen a Section 69 order requesting information, have we? Have we seen that justification? We haven't. The fact, there is a distinct matter that Mr. Malviya is appealing to, which the government has no legal power to question, which is how Twitter marks something as manipulated media. This was my narrow point, and I hope the explanation.
Well, Janaki Raman, you made a point to say that these tech companies are trying to arm twist the sovereign. Twitter and Facebook raising serious questions about privacy, coming out very openly against the government in a manner that these tech companies haven't, saying what the Modi government is trying to do is a violation of citizens' privacy.
We have to understand few things here. See, some of these tech companies thinking they are super government. Okay, they think that they can decide the way they want to conduct the business or operations, not abiding by the laws of India. See, India currently has around 600 million internet users, and the AI is evolving. The deepfake is one of the biggest challenges. The other day I was watching a Bruce Lee fight on the YouTube. I told my son, look, what's an interesting fight? He said, Dad, it's a fake video. A person running a business, the internet company for 20 years and not able to figure out that's a fake video or a real video. India is a multicultural country. If it's not unchecked, it can cause a social disruption. Do you want that, whether live in a peace, harmony, safety in India, or if these social media companies have the potential to reach millions of people? Tomorrow someone create a fake video or fake message. If this can cause a social disruption, it's important as a government, we have to put all this into control. And this company cannot decide operating a country that, I will follow my own rules. I don't follow the laws of India. And they are in India to make money. In fact, they need India more than India needs them. Says everybody is welcome to business India, but they have to abide by the laws because the social media is such a very powerful and big entity. Having millions of users, they have the potential to change anything.
Okay, Mishi, you've looked at the case that's been filed by WhatsApp in the High Court. What's your sense of how strong a legal case has WhatsApp been able to make? They're saying that breaking end-to-end encryption will be violation of privacy, can create scope for misuse in Indian law and in international precedent. How do you think that case will go?
So, this is not the first case which has been filed challenging this part of the rules, which is basically to say, and I think that the government has clarified many times that they do believe in right to privacy, and there is no intent to break it. However, the requirement of Rule 4 Clause 2, which these rules mandate, there is no other way to come up with a solution which will not end up into breaking or compromising end-to-end encryption. So the first case which was filed was in Kerala High Court, which is by a free and open source software developer, because although WhatsApp does get the largest number of users because it's a large market for them, and that's why they become big in news, this case was filed in March. And there are other such entities. There's Mastodon, there is Signal, which is a non-profit organization. There's Matrix, there are various other new innovative projects which keep coming, which release their source code openly, where examination is easier of what they exactly are doing. And they moved the Kerala High Court challenging the exact same thing. I think what has happened is that we all understand that there might be certain bad actors. We've seen it. But requiring traceability provision, and such a matter has been discussed in the Supreme Court also for a very long time. And more technologists have been asked by the Supreme Court to assist them. But nowhere have we found that there is a way to address a small problem that you will not end up compromising the privacy of everybody and creating 1,000 more problems, opening everything to more criminals.
This is like Big Brother watching, Mr. Malviya. Respond to that concern. The moment, and you understand tech platforms and their architecture well, WhatsApp says the moment they start looking at the moment they break end-to-end encryption, it kills their product as it exists right now. The whole USP of WhatsApp is that Mr. Malviya doesn't know what Mishi's been saying about him, and that is the beauty of WhatsApp. The moment that can change, that then puts Mishi and Gurshabad and everybody on their guard. Nobody wants Big Brother to watch Mr. Malviya.
Let me just explain that. First of all, WhatsApp is seeking permission from Indian users to share all its data with Facebook, their parent company. In fact, they share all metadata with them. They apply different yardstick to India than to Europe. In Europe, they are not asking for users to share their data with Facebook, but in India they are. Why? Because in India we have activists who support the kind of arguments that companies like Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp make for reasons best known to them. Secondly, WhatsApp themselves have said that they are fine with providing information if there is a judicial order. So this talk about an end-to-end encryption is a flawed one that they have contradicted themselves. Thirdly, the government of India is not saying that watch every conversation that is going on. The government of India is merely saying that if there is an issue relating to terror, to law and order, to child pornography,
so this is good if it's restricted to that, then the argument would be lesser. But why don't you respond to what happened just last week in the capital, where people were arrested for putting up posters your government didn't like, and the posters only said, why were my vaccines sent abroad? If that's the case, and this is what's happening in real life, it's not a hypothetical scenario what may happen. This is what happened as recently as last week in the capital, sir.
Look, Rahul, if you want to conflate what happened in the city of Delhi and for reasons which are beyond what we're discussing right now, I can come back and have that discussion. It's not that simple, sir.
You realize, Mr. Malviya, well, that we live in the same world. If people can get arrested for putting up a poster, someone like Mishi or Gurshabad say something on WhatsApp or Twitter you don't like, or say something similar, then that could be grounds for arrest going beyond what the original purview is.
Rahul, you are here discussing intent versus what the law or the government wants. I can discuss intent with you till the cows come home. We may never agree on the point. But if you're sticking to the words in the law and what the government wants, then it is very clear that it wants, under these 4 categories, if information is sought by a designated officer or a judicial authority, these tech giants must provide it.
Okay, Gurshabad Grover, Amit Malviya's... One second. Amit Malviya's strongest argument is, if this wasn't Facebook, if this wasn't WhatsApp, let's assume it's a company like Twitter, let's assume it's a company like Signal, then you feel more passionate about trying to defend them because they genuinely believe in privacy, not wanting to know what, not wanting your data or not wanting to monetize it. When it's a company like WhatsApp, which itself is bullying all of us into allowing it to be able to monetize our data better, then that's a very, very fake and weak grounds to be standing on.
Rahul, is that for me?
Yes, it is.
Thanks so much. So on the point of like surveillance capitalism and WhatsApp, Facebook trying to harvest our data, it is absolutely clear that it is a threat to users' privacy. And I mean, you painted a picture of a group like me, and I can assure you that privacy activists are also against privacy violations by private parties and companies. So there is no doubt about that. Now, when it comes to, like Mr. Malviya is pointing out, WhatsApp has a different privacy policy for the US, for the EU, and for India. This is true, but the reason for that is the failure of the government to enact a data protection legislation. It is not the case that WhatsApp is somehow more respecting EU citizens. It is that the EU has passed legislation which restricts how WhatsApp can share its data.
No,
India
so
has it.
Then the solution possibly is for a robust Privacy Protection Act to be brought in at the earliest. Let's push the pedal on that.
Absolutely. And the second part.
I'm out of time. So very quick final comments.
Absolutely.
May I if I quickly...
okay, 20 seconds. Gurshabad.
Thanks so much. And when it comes to the traceability part, which WhatsApp has challenged, and as Michi pointed out, FOSS activists have challenged in other courts, it is very clear that the IT Act does not allow the government to mandate changes to technical platforms. The sections under which the rule is being notified is relating to content takedown and intermediary liability. It has no power to even dictate matters of end-to-end encryption. This is separate from the fact that the government can't propose a solution that only...
fashion. Would it not be better, Mishi, final words for the government to bring a clear, clean, well-discussed privacy law which is passed then in Parliament after discussion, and that really will help ensure that we're able to achieve the kind of equilibrium that's required, which takes care of suspicions of both tech companies and of the government?
Absolutely. I think there is just no question that we are holding accountable every company as well as the government about this. We have been talking and creating awareness about this change in WhatsApp's policies, as well as the hypocrisy about all of this. However, because India has failed to protect its own citizens, that is why we are all suffering here.
Okay.
My major issue is that government should rein in big tech. Big tech has to respect user rights also, and government can't arm twist or get censorship by proxy. We have to hold everyone accountable.
20 seconds, Amit Malviya, I'll let you have the last word.
Well, Rahul, I just heard that these tech giants are respecting of the legislation in Europe. Here is the legislation in India, and they must respect it. And the privacy debate that we are seeing right now was also the case when we legislated Aadhaar. The Aadhaar Act was brought in the parliament, yet these privacy activists were up in arms, and the matter went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the centre triumphed. It is going to happen yet again because these privacy activists hold on to a very narrow view and want to be speaking for these tech giants for reasons that they know best. But the reality is that the government is very clear. The privacy of individuals and citizens will not be compromised, yet we want these tech giants to appoint these 3 nodal officers here, and they must be forthcoming with information relating to the 4 subheadings that the government has stipulated, namely terror, law and order, child pornography,
so I'm out of time
and sexual
on this
crime
debate.
against women.
You've heard Amit Malviya, you've heard internet freedom activists, you've heard Desi Atmanirbhar tech platforms and companies. It's a very, very complex, nuanced debate because you've got the tech sarkar versus Bharat sarkar. Who do you trust more? Can you trust either? Should you be suspicious of the actions of both? You've heard their points of view. I leave it to you to decide which side of this fence you're on. Amit Malviya, Mishi Chaudhary, Aparmaya Radhakrishnan, Murugavel, Janki Raman, Gurshabad Grover, for joining me on this broadcast and for sharing your sharp insights. Thank you. I'm slipping into a break. I'll have more for you on the other side. Stay with us. Back in a moment.